Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is Howard Gottlieb. It's his second time on the Practical Founders Podcast. He was on 2 years ago in episode number 23, talking about the success of his bootstrap software company, Read-A-Thon, fundraising software for schools here in the United States. It was growing fast and very profitable, and he was entertaining some potential offers to acquire the business. The first few didn't work out, but he eventually sold his company in 2023 to private equity investors. So that's a very common outcome for Practical Founders. He's back on the podcast today to talk about how he sold his company, what happened after he sold this company, and how he's doing a year and a half later after having sold a majority of the company. And everybody's mileage will vary when they sell a company, depending on their industry, timing, the type of buyer, and all the other variables. So this is one way to do it. And Howard explained what worked for him and what he learned. Hey, Howard, welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast again. It's great to see you.
Good to be back. Thank you for asking me to come back.
Yes, we've talked several times, and I see you on LinkedIn, and you have since sold your company since you were on the podcast 2 years ago. You were on podcast 23 of the Practical Founder Podcast, and now we're up to 134. So it's been more than 2 years. You were talking about a potential sale, so this is revisiting life after the sale to private equity. So, but recently I saw some photos of you someplace far away. So you're taking advantage of the time, I guess, and some of the money to do some of those bucket list trips. Where did you go recently?
We just got back actually 3 weeks ago from Antarctica. If it's on anyone's bucket list, I would strongly recommend you go ahead and do it. Startlingly beautiful, very different than anywhere on Earth you can go. So long journey, very cold, very interesting, but loved our time there.
How long did you spend there?
We were gone for 3 weeks.
Well, 3 weeks in Antarctica. What an adventure. I see more entrepreneurs doing that these days. It's on the sell your company bucket list to travel, do that adventurous thing. Because we're adventurous people.
Absolutely.
As practical as we are, we have a little crazy in us. So, well, let's start with Read-A-Thon. That's podcast number 23. We're not going to go through the entire journey like we did 2 years ago on the Practical Founders Podcast. What is Read-A-Thon so people understand what was the company that you recently sold?
So Read-A-Thon is a donation-based school fundraising platform, but unlike all the generalists out there, we had a specific product that we focused on reading.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of raving fans with principals, librarians who could kind of combine literacy-based fundraising to, put a focus on reading and literacy as opposed to just asking for money.
Selling Snickers bars. Yeah.
Selling Snickers bars. Had a company that did that, actually. An exit before Read-A-Thon, we actually had the busiest product fundraising website in the country.
Yeah.
And we sold it as we realized the traction that existed with Read-A-Thon.
So Read-A-Thon is software that helps kids go to their grandmother or their neighbors and say, I'm going to read these books. Can you make a donation to our school? We're doing a fundraiser, like many a-thons out there have
Correct.
always done that. But you make the software for a school to put on a Read-A-Thon and kids and take payments and all that stuff. And so take donations.
Correct. We took it a step further. You're owning it. We did, I think, about 4,200 schools were using us. So we could, we had the power and the strength and the staff to create all of the tools that a school couldn't do for themselves.
Right.
So we were actually offering something, a turnkey product, all the paperwork, everything that they needed. So it really was a better way to do something that you might try yourself but couldn't possibly put together the resources for.
Yeah, and on the previous podcast, you described how you had the busiest websites for how to put on a fundraiser, right?
Correct.
And then you got into the leads, and then you found this thing, and you niched down to just reading, just for schools, and you let's say, perfected the system there, and it grew really fast
Grew
as
really
this
fast.
scrappy company without a lot of staff, without a lot of sales and marketing, with no outside investment, right?
No outside investment. We
Yes.
had no accounting department, had no sales department. In fact, Bank of America was our first bank, and they came to visit us, and they said, "Well, let me give a tour. Where's your bookkeeping department?" We said, "Well, we don't
Yeah.
have one." And where's the sales? Well, we don't have that either. And as they walked around, they were kind of astounded at what we were doing with essentially about a dozen people.
Yeah. Well, but you solved the most important part. You got the traffic, the eyeballs, which
We
we
got the
described as
eyeballs.
distribution, right? You got
Correct.
and you built a product that solved it in a few minutes, right? Oh, wow, that
Correct.
was easy.
Correct.
Very specific
Risk
thing.
free. Yeah. Great business. Great business.
Yeah. And did they pay for using the software, or was it all taking a piece of the donation payments?
We were risk free. If you didn't raise money, you didn't pay us. So we took a percentage of donations, and there were different levels that you could go for service levels. We would do everything, but it was still substantially cheaper than any hands-on service out there. A little bit more than a GoFundMe or that
Yeah.
kind of thing, but we were offering substantial amounts of tangible goods to help your event.
Right. And when did you start Read-A-Thon?
So it would have been about 2016,
Yeah.
maybe
After a
2015.
history, a long time in the fundraising business, and
Correct.
it wasn't your first experiment, and you found something finally worked, and
Correct.
you sold it January of 2023 officially. I guess it closed. Is that right?
It was June of 2023, the end of
Okay.
June.
All right. So it hasn't been quite 2 years yet. In
Correct.
this episode, we're going to focus on how you sold the company eventually, how you got through all of that, which is always an adventure, and how the company and your role and everything has changed.
Okay.
Private equity is the predominant buyer of these practical SaaS companies and education technology companies like yours. And it's always different. So I appreciate you coming back on the podcast to
Sure.
share what you can about the story, what happened there. So how big was Read-A-Thon? Maybe you can just give us some numbers, whatever you can share about revenues, customers, employees, profits.
Sure. So in the last year that we had it, a little bit more than 4,000 schools used us, and we were approaching $30 million a year in donations accepted on behalf of the schools.
And
So
your company revenues was some portion of that.
our company
Yeah.
average somewhere our take is in the neighborhood of 23 points.
Okay.
So a good
And
margin.
you had 17 or 18 employees at the time, or did you have a few more than that?
We had less than that, actually. We had about a dozen full-time people, and then seasonally we bring in about 5 or 6. Since the business was concurrent with school, we got a lot of moms who wanted to earn some side money. So, but with a core group of about 12, which included our tech department, our customer service department, and even we had an in-house print shop and a warehouse manager. But we got by with about a dozen people. It's startling when you think about the revenue per head. I mean, you're up at Google numbers at that point.
Yeah, but unlike a SaaS company with a little bit of software AWS fee in there, you had some cost of goods. Your transaction,
Right.
payments there, and your fee on top of that. But you were, let's say, approaching $10 million in net revenue, and it was transactional and very profitable.
Very profitable. Very profitable.
And did you have any partners or investors or co-owners?
I had one very, very minority owner, which was part of the motivation to sell a little bit.
Okay.
And that I probably need to stay away from.
Okay. Yeah. And so were you taking profits, as many practical founders do?
We took 100% of the cash flow. There were no capital requirements.
There we go.
So 100% of the cash flow was distributed.
Well, I had Jason Fried on the podcast last month, the founder of Basecamp, and the author of Rework, one of the original uh, bootstrappers who preached the way to go. But he has it's still an LLC that distribute all the profits every year in the business, and he says he's building it for the owners, at the pleasure of the owners, not trying to sell it because he's having fun.
We were a
He's doing
sub
that.
S. Yeah, we were a sub S versus an LLC, but
Yeah.
same thing.
And so, Howard, you're a little bit older. We talked on the last podcast. You have grown, created, sold half a dozen other companies through your
Correct.
career. So this wasn't your
Correct.
first rodeo.
No.
Wasn't your first sale, I guess.
No, we successfully exited 4 companies.
Yeah.
First one was in my late 20s, and I'd almost like to know, it was a $3 million sale in about 1982. So I don't know what the net present value of $3 million back then was.
Yeah.
But we felt, we had hit the lottery back then. So
Yeah.
I've
And
been
those
very
weren't
fortunate.
software tech businesses.
They were not.
yeah, so you're-
Manufacturing, distribution, even a retail business.
Yeah. So you're that kind of entrepreneur that's going to go into a really hard space and figure it out and be relentless, experiment and do the things nobody else is going to do, find the opportunities, do it very frugally, I guess.
Right. There's a certain skill set to being, I call it a gunslinging entrepreneur, versus the folks that I see mostly on LinkedIn who want to rest comfortably knowing that they've got endless VC money and, there's a slow path. And
That's why we're talking here. All these
all of
practical
this
founders.
stuff. I like the gunslingers better, that just shoot, see what hits, pivot, go.
Sell.
And I also am a big believer in, if you're going to be in business, you're in business to make money. So I can honestly say out of our 6 startups, at least 5 were profitable within 6 months.
Wow.
So, we were making money, and never took a dollar of VC money.
So as somebody who says, I'm going to go sell it and figure it out, and I don't want anybody telling me what to do, and we're going to make some profits, the whole venture capital idea didn't make sense to you at all, probably.
No, I'm a big MVP believer, minimum viable product, get that out to market. Let me see if someone's willing to buy it. The only way you know if you have a market, to me, is if someone's willing to pay you. So a lot of the folks that build these things and they gain traction with zero revenue models and VC money, they don't know whether they really have a market or not because no one's actually paid them. I believe.
Oh, the VC paid him.
The VC paid them.
Yeah,
Yeah. But you need to understand what a VC is there for. They're not. They are assuming that the majority of their deals are going to fail.
Yeah.
They're there for a few home runs, and if you're not it, they're going to squeeze the heck out of you.
Life gets painful.
Life gets
I get
painful.
it. All right. So on the last podcast 2 years ago, you said, well, people call me all the time about, hey, can we fund you? Thanks. Can we buy you? You would entertain these discussions. And you said if I was 20 something, I probably wouldn't even entertain them. I was just going to go long because it's a really big opportunity. You're a little bit older and you entertained them, and somebody made an offer you couldn't refuse, I guess. So how did that materialize, going from maybe I'll sell, I don't have to do anything, to starting that process?
So the journey for me may have been different from that of others.
Yeah, of course.
We actually got approached by the largest private equity company in the ed tech industry. And we had a deal to close 6 months prior to when we actually closed. Actually, it was 9 months prior. And that deal fell apart about 2 weeks before the close because the operating company that they were going to fold us into had just hired a CEO, a new CEO, and he was responsible for the outcome of the investment, and he just wanted a pause. As it turned out, it turned out to be a good deal for me. That would have been an all-cash sale, a very, very big PE company, very professional. When that deal fell apart, which, by the way, anyone who goes down this journey learned very quickly that when you celebrate getting an LOI or a letter of intent, it's meaningless. It's a piece of toilet paper.
An LOI is a letter of intent. So somebody says, we want to buy you, and they push it across the table for this amount, and everybody gets interested.
And
but
you say,
it's
no,
not
that's not
binding.
enough. So they double it, and they
Yeah.
give you whatever they think you require to hear to sign a letter of intent. And then later on, you'll negotiate what you're really going to sell for. So anyway, the
Oh,
first
wow.
people were good and solid. We had another type of PE company approach us, and I wasted 3 months talking to them. And then I got involved with a group of one hedge fund and two private equity firms that had collectively worked together looking for earnings plays, EBITDA plays, not
Yeah.
multiples of sales and hoping. And those are the people that ultimately bought us. But
Okay.
we were involved with the sales process for a year and a half. If I had to do it over again, oof, that's
What would you do differently? Would you, it doesn't sound like you hired a banker to
we did
go
not.
shop it to 25 or 200 private
So
equity
we
firms.
we had so interestingly and I'll probably tell you more than you want to know. The people who bought us, and we're still the second largest shareholder in Read-A-Thon, ultimately are already looking at their exit strategy because the company's doing very well. They will hire an investment banking company to represent that sale.
Okay, right. On
Okay,
the second time it gets sold, right?
right,
Yeah.
but a much bigger sale. I had two very large investment banking firms that wanted to represent us.
Mm,
But if you use them, your cost could approach $1 million on a $30 million transaction. And I don't know what you get when you're being bombarded with inbound phone calls saying, I want you, I want you, I want you. So we chose to not, whether that was a good decision or not, I don't know.
hmm
Uh, we had no fancy deck. We had no fancy marketing materials.
Yeah.
In fact, part of the bourbon was when private equity comes in, they're going to learn your business, and they've got a whole bunch of questions from what you consider a naive viewpoint. It's really not naive, it's just not knowing. So they'll ask for a whole bunch of data that you never even thought about. And then you find, well, maybe some of it's great data I should have thought about,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
but you're spending all of your waking hours collecting data, and it
Yeah.
becomes your full-time job and your full-time focus. So if you go down that private equity thing, it just expects 6 months of your life is going to be dedicated to satisfying due diligence with very thorough professionals. If you're dealing with good private equity people, they'll be using people like Bennett Thrasher or Alvarez, people who are absolute professional auditors and know how to digest numbers better than you do.
And they'll check everything: your
They'll check everything,
customers, your
everything,
code, your financials, your banking, your
everything.
reputation, etc. Your
Yeah.
contracts,
Yeah, you give them the information and then you get an email and says, well, I have a few follow-up questions. And you open it up and it's a 17-page document with question bullet points, question bullet points, question bullet points. Oh my gosh, and you say,
Yeah.
you're kidding me. But
Well, that sounds like an onerous process. And most founders, almost every founder always says that was hardest part of this whole damn journey. I
right,
had my day job and I had to do these other things, my
right.
spare time. But you were growing this thing, and Read-A-Thon was taken off, and you were pulling profit out every year. Howard, why would you consider selling your company as opposed to the high ROI thing for founders is to double it and C or triple it at C? Why would you consider selling your company? It's your own story. What was it in your mind?
Um, our limitation was our technical abilities. And the
Uh-huh.
downside of being a gunslinging entrepreneur
Hmm.
is that you do so many of the functions yourself. And I don't, if I could go back in time 5 years ago at Read-A-Thon, I would have hired a better tech staff. I would have hired a high-powered marketing person,
Mm,
and we would have looked at that. But we were making so much money and growing, it just seemed why.
mhm.
The private equity people say, why not?
Yeah.
And let's stabilize. So our business would get so busy in 1 week out of the year, Read-A-Thon would be one of the 1,000 busiest websites on the planet. In our busiest day, we would do 40 or 50,000 credit card transactions. And our server base wasn't made for it. Our code base We were crashing our systems on our busiest days.
But you could have taken some of the profits and said, all right, we'll get the
Sure, absolutely.
tech team 2.0 or whatever. But
Right. The frustration of it, and my age probably. And the third people offered me two options. They said, we'll give you all cash, or do you want to roll over some equity? And the valuation was generous. So we kept enough of the company to be, own approximately a third of it.
okay.
So I always believed in the potential. I also understood that there's a different skill set between being a CEO of a maturing company and being a gunslinger, and you don't want to
Entrepreneur,
risk
bootstrapper, figure
right.
it out. Yeah,
Right. You don't want to risk the house every week. And they don't. In fact, the painful thing for me now is they move so slow in pushing code and processing ideas. And that's a little bit of the hedge fund side that, hedge fund folks are just risk managers.
Yeah.
If you want to know what a hedge fund guy is, they'll look at risk from angles you didn't know existed. I never looked at risk. I just looked at opportunity. And if I screwed it up, so what? We lost some money. They don't do it like that. So
well, that's why that's why the big money, big companies can't create this stuff. They can't be the crazy experimenters out there. So, which private equity firm did you finally work with?
So interestingly, I can't say because the lead investor wants to be private about it. The other two wanted press releases. In fact, we just acquired a company and there's no press releases. I would be on the mountaintops telling everyone about it. The lead investor is simply after EBITDA targets through performance improvements and acquisitions. And it's working. I mean, it's they will hit their target.
So was it private equity? There's all kinds of versions of private equity who bought not a minority of your company, more than half, right? So it's like 2/3.
The collective group did.
Right. So there was a group that got together, looked for ed tech companies and said, this is a good one. It's a profit engine. We could really grow it. Right. And you started the due diligence here. What were the major points of negotiation? Was it the multiples of EBITDA, the valuations, and minority, majority, how much to sell, and your role after the sale? What are the things that eventually work their way out?
So interestingly, and I don't know how often this works, Read-A-Thon worked out where the multiple of EBITDA or the multiple of revenue almost hit spot on formulas either way. And you almost came up with the same number.
You were growing and profitable, right?
Right. So we almost hit the same number if you took a revenue, 4x revenue or 10x EBITDA, you were almost at the same number. So we knew our number. Then it was, do I want all cash? And we were fortunate because we had exited a company just prior to Read-A-Thon and we had prior exits. So money wasn't my main motivator. And I really wanted some good operators who could take what I thought we had and listen to what I thought we needed to do and have a say at the table. And this group seemed to be it. If I didn't sell to them, we probably would have kept it because 3 discussions with 3 different PE firms over a year and a half will age you tremendously. And, I don't think I was up for a 4th. So,
And did you feel like they got it? They got what this special Read-A-Thon engine was?
They loved the company. They love it today. It will be a home run for them. So when private equity buys you, they're going to hope for about a 3-4x exit. These people, we may be looking at a 7-8x exit. That's the home run that they don't get, every. But
so
every
this isn't a holding company for your profits to pile up profits like Warren Buffett. They have their 5 years and 5x kind of goal.
Correct.
That they make their big return on that growth game and reselling it probably to another private equity.
Right. And and they structure things differently than you do. They're not afraid of debt. I never had debt. They like debt, and excess cash flow doesn't go to pay down debt. Excess cash flow goes to have a war chest in case an acquisition shows up. So when we made the acquisition that we made, and I really can't talk about who it is, but it's they generate more than $100 million of transactional income, but it's a much smaller margin. But Read-A-Thon had enough cash to pay a substantial portion of the cash portion of that deal. So, we weren't diluted heavily with a capital call and that sort of thing. So it's an interesting.
So you got paid out on a portion of the company, but you kept your equity, and effectively you're an investor in the NewCo, right?
Correct. It's exactly that's the term they use.
Okay.
And understand too, if you do this, that until there's a capital call and you've got to write a check, rollover equity is treated as an inferior investment to cash investments. And you'll be reminded of that early on until you've got, and we did have a small capital call, so I don't let them tease me about the rollover equity being inferior to the cash equity.
And the reason you wouldn't cash it all out is you say, as you said on the last podcast, this is a unicorn opportunity. We're scratching the surface. It's going to be huge. You don't want to take it out now. Watch them get all the prize money. So you get to ride along for your second bite of the apple, right? You always had your first bite and so forth. So that's how you were playing it. And you had to trust them that they were going to do the right things to make Read-A-Thon huge.
So we had the benefit of their current CEO actually rode along with me for about 3 or 4 months prior to the close. So I could train him. We could talk about instinct and the industry and all of that sort of stuff. So he wasn't compensated for it. Absolutely. And for me now, he at least walked in the door. And like I tell him, I want you to hear everything I say. Listen to what you want. I hope you listen more than you don't, but at least listen. And he does. We meet regularly. He hears what I have to say. He understands we're different. That he used the word audacity to describe me. I'm an audacious operator, which he said a lot of people would think that's a negative, but it's a very big positive as the way he described it. So
that's great.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Was that part of the deal that said, I'll sell you part of my company. I'll ride along with you on my second bite. You're on the board presumably and have a say there, and I'll coach was it part of the deal that there was a new CEO to come in and run Read-A-Thon for this next phase? It didn't roll up into another company. It's still an independent company.
Right.
Was that something you wanted?
Absolutely. What I wanted, so this guy, his resume is pretty impressive. He was with people like Sabre in their early days, Travelocity. He on the chief product officer kind of level.
Wow.
So much bigger.
Scale
and he is a data-driven operations guy. I wouldn't call him a product guy and wouldn't call him a sales guy. He's a data-driven upper-level manager, which, that's not my skill set.
So let's go along here. You did the due diligence. I guess you had your own lawyers. They have their experienced lawyers, and you're probably outgunned there. Did you get through that negotiation process okay? You didn't have to sell the company. You could have walked away at any time. There's profits there.
Right.
Did you get through that okay?
We did. A lot of trying times. If it's something that's in your future, know that as much as you know your business better than they do, they know how to buy businesses better than you know how to sell them. And they are much more professional at negotiating. And you start, like I said, with the LOI. I mean, if you've never sold a business, you get this LOI, you think, man, this is fabulous. It's absolutely meaningless.
Then they come back with it. Yeah, we weren't going to count this.
Yeah,
and
gosh.
You took cash out. We don't count that. And,
oh my gosh, we'd love to do that, but we can't. So if you need to sell, you'll lose. Mm-hmm. So you probably never want to sell when you need to. Yeah. And every day you have to be willing to say, we're done,
Yeah.
or I'll give you till Friday, and mean it.
Yeah.
If you're not there, then you need representatives who are talking for you. We did have a very good M&A attorney in Fort Worth.
Okay.
We have intellectual property attorneys in Dallas. We had financial advisors. So at least I did have a pool of folks around me harnessing me in a little bit.
Did you have, as many founders do to get to this, a wealth advisor that helps you say, you're going to have this big pot of money and there's tax implications and here's what you do to, or did that come later?
We already had wealth advisors in our lives. I didn't really involve them with the transaction.
Okay. Yeah.
Since it cost me $500 to start Read-A-Thon, and we took 100% of the cash flow. My basis was nothing. So it was we did structure the deal through the M&A legal counsel as a 100% capital gain. So beyond that, there was no planning.
Okay. How long did it take when you got an LOI, a handshake deal, and we said this could be, let's go and do the due diligence and sell? How long did it take between there and the time you signed all the documents and got a bigger bank account?
I think it was between 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
And very trying time. Very exciting at the end, by the way. You sit there, you sign the documents, and they don't hand you a check like they did in the old days.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They tell you, you signed all the documents, and it goes
Click, click.
click, click, and then you sit there and you refresh the account that you're having them wire the funds to, and all of a sudden you see these zeros show up, and you go, wow, this is true. And interestingly, the more you do it, and it may happen all the time, it's almost surreal. It's not as exciting as you think it would be. It's almost at that point, all right, it's done, and now what? But you would think it would be ecstatic and you'd be jumping for joy, and
Yeah.
that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, they kind of grind all the fun out of it to make this thing happen. And
Yeah.
it is one of the things we talk about with founders, which is, what was it like when you refreshed your bank account and showed your wife, see, honey, I was, it really turned out to be something.
Now what? Yeah, now what?
Yeah. Did you have that experience, that now what kind of thing? Because maybe you show up on Monday and you're not the CEO anymore, or there's a transition in place.
Probably the most shocking thing for me, because again, we've done this a few times. So
Yeah.
we're not the richest people in the world, but we were comfortable. So if we didn't sell it, we were fine. Probably the most shocking thing was going into the office the next day and introducing Toby as the CEO.
Oh, right.
Explaining, and he had been around, so they knew it was a process. But
So everybody was aware this was going on, I guess.
if you think you're going to keep selling your company as a secret from your employees, you are kidding yourself.
Yeah, a small team like that, right.
Yeah, you cannot supply everything that the due diligence folks want on your own, or you're really small and really simple. And we were small and very simple, but I needed help all the time. So I was very open about why I was doing it, that it was for the benefit of the company, and to get it to a certain size that I thought they were better equipped to do.
Yeah. Were they excited about that, or was that a disappointing phase, or what?
We had a very small business, very family oriented, a lot of tears, a lot of shock. And then when I left the building, I told myself I'm not going to walk. The office is I can walk to it. It's 6 miles down the road. I promised I wouldn't walk in the building again for at least 6 months, because people were calling me that first day saying, hey, Toby wants to do this. It's nuts. Can you talk to him? And I didn't want to cut their legs out from under them. So now I go down every once in a while. But that was probably the most emotional moment for me. And the reality was, it was like marrying your daughter. Here's the new husband or new wife. So for me, that was the eye opener.
Did you literally, walk out the door and say, it's Toby's, I don't have, all my meetings are cleared, and, my email account, I'll check it less often. And,
Right.
it's, they bought control of the company, and it's not your baby anymore. Did you feel like that? Your schedule was cleared pretty quickly?
I felt like my schedule was cleared. I also felt like, and this is another hard thing, that if you keep equity, you'll still feel like you're the smartest guy in the room as far as your business goes, but you can't exert any authority to make sure that the best decisions are being made. But I have since found, and this is kind of a silly story, they came up with what I thought was an absolutely crazy revenue enhancer at Read-A-Thon. I thought it was a company killer. In fact, I was so vocal about it.
Oh, it's audacious. Those audacious guys.
Yeah. It turned out to be a home run.
Oh, right. Okay,
I even wanted to say to them, look, if you do this, you're risking the company. I want you to buy me out. But I didn't, and as it turned out, it really, really worked well. It was one of the best decisions. So the thing that you do get when you sell to private equity, by the way, is instead of just your own mind making all these decisions, you got a bunch of smart people sitting around a table saying, well, why would you say that? Are you sure? Have you considered?
Show me the numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can, and we have great board meetings. I mean, they are heated at times, fun at times. But there's a lot of smart people sitting at that room with risk capital on the table saying,
right.
And then there's some people who have, 5-year windows that they're looking at the investment. There's others that want to get out in a year, and, and you take all of those opinions and you put it together and you come up with a great growth strategy. In fact, I'm so excited about where they've positioned Read-A-Thon. The goal is to get to somewhere in the low 8-figure EBITDA range.
Low 8-figure EBITDA range. Wow.
Yeah. Within 18 months, maybe, of now. A company in our industry.
So that means that top line revenue donations is more than 5 times, 5 to 10 times more, pretty quickly?
We were about 3 times where they bought us.
Right. Wow.
Within 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
A company in our industry that is at a little bit less than $10 million in EBITDA, but we think has matured in their segment, apparently just got an offer for 14x EBITDA.
Wow.
Which is unheard of right now.
Right.
On the other side of the coin, you should know this, the word on the street for private equity is there's very few good assets available out there. A lot of companies for sale, but good, solid, provable assets that have growth potential and provable, maintainable cash flow.
And a big opportunity.
Big opportunity. Yes. Very hard to find.
For all of that bootstrapper, entrepreneur, audacious, thing, this scrappy team, very frugal, you solved the harder problems, which is you found an opportunity that was growing fast and very profitable. So I don't know, it wasn't just a rule of 40 company, 20% growth, 20%. It was growing very fast. So you were an A+ from that. You were also known as the leader in this space. You didn't grow by Super Bowl ads. You grew by everybody saying, this is awesome, it works, this is awesome, it works, and the SEO and so forth. So it was known as a leader in its space. So you didn't have bookkeepers, but you were known as a leader, and this thing was growing, and it could be $1 billion opportunity. So that's harder to do.
Our retention rate was in excess of 90%. Wow. So we had raving fans.
Yes.
We had more reviews coming in than we could post on our website. But we were anal about the product. I mean, there wasn't a day that went by that we didn't look for some little thing that we could do a little bit better.
So was that kind of organic traffic that you had built up, and you had experience with that, and this product experience that they click, and wow, something happened, and wow, I'm going to do a Read-A-Thon. That was easy, right? So it was, let's say, product-led is the modern way to say that. And now they're figured out, do they have new growth plans to get eyeballs and partnerships and product ideas? And I say, are they going every single direction, or are they keeping the focus that you had?
So they've hired a high-powered VP of marketing.
Okay.
This lady has sat through the last two board meetings. She's unbelievably impressive.
Wow.
She grew one of her last businesses from 500. She was in the school space as well.
Yeah.
She grew one from 500 doors to 40,000 doors in 3 years. And she believes, that was a product you had to buy. There was cost. There was
Yeah.
a guarantee. With Read-A-Thon, there's no risk, no cost up
Yeah.
front. So she believes she could do the same thing. To listen to the way she approaches marketing and listen to the way I used to approach marketing. That's why you go to private equity. They go hire someone at
Yeah.
that cost of that caliber that a 12-person company in Mansfield, Texas doesn't think to do.
Yeah.
They
Yeah, because
hire.
you could tell that story, which is we were the scrappy entrepreneurs. We lived in the frontiers and figured this thing out, and we've got a hot property. I don't want to be the person that takes this to 100 million in revenues with C-level everybody's and hundreds of employees and
No,
financial controls and board meetings and so. That's not your style.
that's not my style.
Yeah.
You see how I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
dressed.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I dressed up for you.
Yeah.
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 So
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So that's awesome. What was there anything that it's been a year and a half now. We're getting on more than 18 months since almost 18 months since you sold the company. What's the biggest surprise about how they're doing things that you didn't expect? That you said, "Gee, I didn't even know that was a thing."
So I'm surprised at how they use debt.
Okay.
I'm surprised at how they structure deals. They just think outside the box. When I owned any business, the goal for me was to be debt free if possible.
Mm-hmm.
And at some companies we did have bank relationships and bank debt, but my goal was always to take cash flow and
Yeah.
pay
Yeah.
down debt.
Yeah.
They couldn't care less about paying off debt, but I never really thought about EBITDA, that interest costs really don't affect the next buyer. I'm going to add all that back. So they are more concerned with generating EBITDA than anything else. And, the terms they'll use will be, are you growing top line revenue? What can you do to maximize margins? They'll look at OpEx,
Yeah.
is everything in line? They'll use the terms, can we bolt on another company to,
Mm-hmm.
to get our revenue up? All they're looking for, where I wanted to build the best fundraising company on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
they want to build the largest cash generator that they can generate.
Yeah.
And they're proud of the company. Read-A-Thon's a phenomenal company. Once in a lifetime. I wish I could do it again, but a lot of luck and all that stuff. They are after building EBITDA. And again, they're on.
Is that an investment mentality versus like the frugal spend prevention mentality?
Sure. The discussion that you'll always hear with PE firms is, IRRs and, that they need to match
Internal
certain
rates of
returns,
return, yeah.
right, for their investors and their internal folks. And a lot of people who are feeding on the transaction, they only get a bite of the pie if you can meet or exceed the IRR. So everyone's, in line, motivated to do the same thing. It's just interesting. This last board meeting was, I loved it. Such interesting, hard discussion. I couldn't be that CEO sitting there having 6 people pepper me with questions, and you can't be pissed off and you can't, fight back. You've got to have the answer. You don't know what the questions are before you get there. I couldn't do it. I would tell them to go, kiss my butt and get out of the room and get lost. So interesting. I had a blast at it, and I think that we're all aligned. And I do think, I'll have a second exit in the same business within 3 years of the first one.
Right.
4 years max, and I wouldn't have gotten there without it. And had I taken all cash 18 months ago, I would have gotten about half of the value that I'll end up getting from doing it this way with this group.
Okay. So this is a successful second bite of the apple. It's growing fast. Profits are growing. They they know what the next buyer wants, and it's getting ready for that. And
Right.
will you make more money from the second bite of the apple?
Substantially.
Right. Even though you sold the majority of the company first off.
I'll
So
get more for my third. I'll get substantially more for the third than I got for the 2/3.
yeah. What is the biggest frustration you have with this private equity type situation? You didn't sell it to a strategic. They cash you out and wave goodbye. You still have to deal with them. You're still part owner of this new entity. Um, you're a part owner, so I'll expect you to be reasonably polite here. But what is the frustration that you have that you imagine a lot of practical founders selling to private equity will someday experience?
The private equity folks themselves will never know the industry or the
Yeah.
business as well as you do. And no matter how, unless you keep control, you will not have the final say. So you've got to convince folks that not only did I start this thing, not only did I develop it from its infancy, not only was I recognized as the leader in the industry, you're wrong in what you're saying. But maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's been a good experience for me.
Yeah.
I am glad. So I see all these conversations again on LinkedIn. Think long and hard about funding. If you've got a business worth investing, maybe take on debt instead of giving up equity to a venture
Yes, right. We
capitalist.
talk about that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're ready for private equity, know why you're ready. Either you want to exit or you want help.
Yeah.
If it's not one of those two things, don't do it.
Yeah.
Your life changes. Post transaction is a new world. And again, you talk to people with all different size companies. I've got enough money that I can do anything I really want in life. Money isn't a means isn't an end in of itself.
Yeah.
You can have all the money in the world, and so what?
Yeah.
So if you don't have purpose, and if you're a hard charging entrepreneur, when you sell, you better have something to replace it. Or just want some downtime for a little while. And I'm not terribly good with downtime.
Right.
So, I'm looking at a couple of startups. I've been an investor in some other startups.
There you
I've actually, as much as I hate venture capital for me, I'm okay at being a venture capital
That's the
investor.
ultimate irony. What the Bootstrapper
I'll
wins
be
the
an-
biggest
I'll-
prize
I'll be-
around.
yeah,
Right.
I'll be the
Yes.
venture capital investor because you're willing to give me so much for an idea that I vetted and I believe in. And I'm thinking, how foolish are you to give me 10% or 20% of your company for peanuts? So
Did you
it
go
is
through
interesting.
withdrawals? You sold your company, you walked out, Toby took over. You said, I'm not coming back to the building for 6 months, just to make a break. Was it hard and mentally screwball for you to not
So
drive this thing that you was so intensely connected every single day? I'm sure you
right,
thought about it all the time.
the timing was actually perfect because we closed in June, and typically I would take about 2 months off. I would take
Oh,
Junes and Julys off
yeah,
because the schools were out. And my wife and I travel a lot. We go
that's
on
great.
5 or 6 big trips a year. So we did fill the first year. I mean, we were probably gone 7 months.
Wow. You just went.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and we traveled a lot before anyway,
Hmm.
because it's a digital business, and
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So no, now what I'm finding, I never started a company before with the intent of selling it. I am looking at 2 startup ideas. I'm intrigued with AI agents,
Yeah.
and that the world is changing. And I've identified 2 products that are still hardware dependent, and yet good industries that I think I can replace with an AI agent using your phone and a watch. So
Hmm.
no hardware. So I'm exploring those possible startups, but
To be the CEO, right? And run it, be the scrappy
to
creator.
be the scrappy startup guy
Yeah.
with the intent on, if I'm right, I'll sell it in a year or 2.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to be 69 years old this year. I don't
Yay.
think I have another 5 or 10 year management gig in me. And nor do I want it. But again, the other thing that I have on my mind is second exit will be big enough. We're going to start a family office. We're already talking to folks to come on board and be a small family office that is a private equity investor only.
Yeah.
I feel
So
like
you have your team that invests your pile of money and gives,
correct.
that kind of thing. So, and you're creating your own as opposed to working with one of the big family offices where they support 10 families,
Correct.
entrepreneurs who've cashed out, those kind of things.
And the reason for that is when you get into private equity and the smaller firms get carried interest and you start
Yeah.
diluting
Yeah.
kind of things, you're giving people part of the upside on the wish and the hope when it's your risk capital. And I feel
So
like
you're the scrappy guy that says, I'll pay you. I'll just pay
right,
you. It's
right. I mean, and I feel like I'm the entrepreneur. I've got an ex-hedge fund guy that'll probably run the office for me. So I've got risk management on one side, gunslinging entrepreneurship on the other.
Yeah.
So we could help, early stage entrepreneurs a little bit, or stagnant companies. So I'm looking forward to that.
So
And
what do you do
that's
with all this money, Howard? We've worked for the prize and we know there's a prize inside, whether that was their main goal or not. Did you
it's
buy
interesting.
a bigger house or,
No, no,
travel at
no.
a different level or what's
No,
changed?
really nothing. The discussions internally for us are, what do you do with it? Um, my
Donate it,
kids are
right? Create a foundation.
my kids are set up. We've created. If you ever sell your company, you want a tax shelter, you should look into donor advised funds.
Yes. Uh-huh.
You can set up a good chunk of your income
Yeah.
before you give it away. You can't
So
get it
defer your
back.
taxes and put, your
Right.
charitable
So
donations in a,
yeah, we've
yep.
done that. We've got a substantial DAF set up. So I don't know. That's a great question. When you don't need the, it's funny in life when you're 24 or 28 and broke and struggling to get started is when you desperately need the money. When you don't need it, it comes easier for some reason sometimes. And,
Well, if you were in San Francisco and everybody was making $100 million, you might get the things that everybody gets, the plane or whatever, that stuff. But
yeah,
you're outside of Fort Worth, Texas, and you've been doing things a long time and you're not
got
going
it.
to change your tune and everything. But
No, no,
you're not like saying, I'm going to put, 1,000 kids through college or, something like that, or, donate
no.
to the church or, you
Well,
know,
we've thought about setting up a foundation and doing things, but then we said after talking to a lot of folks, there are people who are better at doing all the specifics that we would do that with. So we're very generous with our money.
yeah.
In our opinion, extremely generous, and continue
Well,
and
that's what
plan
angel
on.
investing's all about, Howard. In case
Right.
you haven't learned,
Well,
right?
but
It's being
charities,
generous and not expecting
yeah,
a return.
yeah. I mean, I feel like the Bible tells me, take care of widows and orphans and take care of the hungry.
Yeah,
So we do that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We've
Good for
set
you.
up our kids, we've set up our grandkids. Um,
Yeah.
just
Well,
enjoy
look
life
at
at this
that
point.
journey here. If is there anything you would have done differently in this process that might be interesting? That's just one way to do it. You had your options and choices. There's many ways to do it for practical founders. Is there anything that you would have done differently looking back now?
Yes, I would have. I should have. I didn't need the money to be distributed as our cash flow grew. I
Yeah.
should have reinvested it.
Okay. You could have invested more. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should have done a little bit of what the private equity is doing, um, firmed up technology and firmed up marketing. And
Yeah.
Read-A-Thon can be a $200-300 million company.
Yeah.
It has that potential.
Yeah.
We handed it off at 30.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing that you'll hear from private equity is make sure there's meat on the bone when you want to exit. You don't want to be so mature because that's when multiples start dropping back down to 4 and 5x if there's no upside. So, there's still enormous upside. And somebody someday will own Read-A-Thon and it'll be in 50,000 schools doing $1 billion. And
Right.
I'll say to my grandkids or my great grandkids, I started that.
Yeah.
And that'll be my pride moment.
Excellent. Well, how many kids now are using Read-A-Thon and, in these 5,000 schools, and how many
Right. So
books are they reading?
last year, a little under 2 million kids. And I think that they added up the minutes read on the site, and it was over 50 billion minutes read. So that was actually one of the things we were most proud of. You can't put a tangible value on it, but I would say there's no website on the planet that can say that we've facilitated 50 billion minutes of childhood reading. It's mind-boggling. Even a million eight readers signed up in a year. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
And we're
good for
not
you.
a
What a great
drop in
cause.
the bucket.
Defying
Yeah.
the cell phones and the games and everything else that takes kids' attention to get them,
Yeah.
reading
Great
as
journey.
well.
Very, very blessed in the journey. Very lucky. And everyone should realize that, have some humility. If you succeed at the game, you can be the smartest guy, the smartest woman, the most brilliant idea. It will take 50% or more luck for everything to align correctly to succeed, and just realize that. So when you read a lot of the stories you read on LinkedIn, a lot of the people are full of baloney. They're not that brilliant.
Right.
It takes a lot of good fortune.
And making good fortune, right? To be in the game, pushing hard to find those good fortune when it shows up and double down when it's there. What is your version of the luck that you experienced? Was it having a certain personality type that, got to go create this opportunities, or be there when the market turned to the internet from the old school? And I don't know. What's your luck?
At Read-A-Thon, clearly it was COVID. Because online fundraising was in its infancy. In fact, one of my favorite stories when I had the prior company was Easy Fundraising, is Brad Damphouse, the founder of GoFundMe,
right,
came to me and said, "Howard, I see that you show up on search all the time for every fundraising term. Will you sell me your traffic, or can we partner in an affiliate relationship, and I'll give you 50% of everything that we raise from the traffic?" And I wasn't interested in selling my traffic. I was interested in converting it to a sale and a product. So we said no. So we grew okay in the times when GoFundMe was, in those early days. But when COVID hit and schools were out, we were almost the only viable option, and our growth went from 40-50% a year to 100-150% a year. So that was luck. Losing a business early on in my career, getting swindled out of a deal, turned out to be the best thing that happened to me. Losing everything, going broke, not filing bankruptcy, but learning the hard way that appearances aren't necessarily indicative of the truth, that the people you think are really successful may not be. People that you think are extremely wealthy may be very indebted and look that way. So a lot of good lessons in life. I've been so blessed and so lucky throughout my career. I want to pinch myself sometimes.
Yeah, way to be grateful, Howard, for all of your success. And I'm sure you worked extremely hard and used all your talents along the way. You've shared a bunch of wisdom today for practical founders. You share it on LinkedIn. And your profile, you're still out there, sharing your gems. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with practical founders out there, besides your last bit of advice, something that would help them, and maybe the ones that are eyeing an eventual private equity acquisition?
So interestingly, the advice I would give someone probably is long before they would consider venture capital. Once I became a little public after the sale of the company, I can't tell you how many hundreds of people reached out to me through LinkedIn wanting me to invest in their companies. There are 100 million good ideas out there. There are no shortage of good ideas. What there's a shortage of is distribution. So spend your time. If I have this good idea, how do I sell it? How do I distribute it? Can I do that cost effectively?
How do I get traffic? How do I get interest? Right. How do I get awareness?
I can build the app I'm looking to build, I think, has a provable billion-dollar market, but it's got some old branding that people relate to the function. It's expensive. I could do it for 10 cents on the dollar with no hardware. I could offer you 10 times the features. So, and I could probably build it for $250,000. In fact, I know I could build the whole thing for $250,000. If I build it, then what?
Yes.
My
and you're
Facebook
back to sales
ads,
and marketing, right there.
Yeah, can I get enough Facebook ads to get myself 10,000 users, 100,000 users? So it's start with your idea, then go to distribution, and then go to minimum viable product, and go to bed every night with that minimum viable product until you've proven your distribution works. If you can't do that, you'll be probably in the 90% that fail at business. So that's my advice to every young person. I wish someone had told me that early on in my career. Start with distribution and revenue. Prove that you can make money at it.
And before Read-A-Thon, you had the busiest website in the world with the most traffic about fundraising for schools. So you had the eyeballs. And you kept going.
We knew SEO, we knew website conversion, we knew, conversion optimization. So, I feel like we know online marketing. And even still, if you're going to start something, how are you going to distribute it? How are you going to distribute it? And if it costs $250 to build, is it going to cost you $5 million to market it? Is it going to cost you $1 million to market it? Can you bootstrap $50,000 to market it? I'll probably do it just because if I lose the investment on the app, it's not the end of the world. But a bootstrapping startup entrepreneur can't do that unless you take VC money, and then they're going to own half your idea. And if it's great, you've lost half. If it's not, they don't care to lose a couple $100,000 betting on a flyer. So that's my advice. Okay.
Yeah. Back to the sales and marketing game. Kids these days don't call it distribution like we did in the old days, right? But it's it's all about the marketing, selling, and getting the revenue going. And it ain't, like you said, it ain't anything unless somebody's willing to pay for it. So
right. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me here on the Practical Founders Podcast for a recap after the sale. Good to see you again. Congratulations on your exit and your happy travels and, a transition. And I guess you'll get back in the game soon enough here with new adventures, new frontiers.
We'll do it. Greg, I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the time.
Thanks, Howard.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks for watching this week's founder interview on the Practical Founders Podcast. Be sure to hit like and then subscribe to my Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly videos for serious software founders who are building valuable companies without big funding. Check out my blog and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com. And follow me on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going. See you next week.